Well, hi, my name is Bey Logan, and welcome to the Cineasia DVD release of another Kung Fu classic, Yip Man 2. And this film very much follows the tradition of Once Upon a Time in China 2, Drunken Master 2. They're classic sequels to martial art movies, and these sequels that are almost as good as the original film. And I'm hoping, actually, this series doesn't follow the same path, because Once Upon a Time in China 3 and Drunken Master 3 were both kind of disappointing. So they're on a good track so far with these two films. We open with a recap of footage from the first Yip Man movie, showing the early adventures of this master of Wing Chun Kung Fu, played by Donnie Yen Chi-Dan. You see the sign there on the right for matches. It says they spike every time. They spike every time. And these are all from the first film. We see him as a Wing Chun master in Fatsan in southern China. The Japanese have invaded, taken over. He wins a duel, is wounded by a soldier after winning the duel, and then escapes from China, actually with the help of Simon Yam's character, but they've kind of rewritten history a little bit here. We see this is new footage shot for Yip Man 2, and that's actually a digital wound there to Simon Yam's head. It's not a prosthetic. That was actually, if you actually watch the first film, it doesn't really work, but they wanted to have the idea that Simon Yam's character survived, came to Hong Kong and resettled, and we'll see him later in much reduced circumstances living in Hong Kong. Here are the images of Hong Kong. Now, the film itself, this movie, Yip Man 2, was shot. Darren Shalavi's name there, written by a 5-year-old. I don't know how that came to be quite in that style of writing on the credits, but that's how it is. So we have the images of Hong Kong. Actually, this was all shot at the famous Shanghai Film Studios, and I think they've made it look more like a southern Chinese city. They don't really ever quite create 1940s, late 30s, early 40s Hong Kong the way the first film did, Fatsan. And here we are from CGI land back into reality, and what will be for people who've watched the first movie, and I have to anticipate that many of you watching this film will have seen Yip Man 1 or Yip Man, the sight and sound of Kung Fu Master Yip Man training on the wooden dummy. This movie, subtitled in Chinese, is The Grand Master Yip Man. Slight controversy about that because Wong Kar-wai, the legendary art house director, is also doing his own Yip Man movie called The Grand Master, and he was maybe put out, but no one disputes the fact Yip Man was the Grand Master of Wing Chun, so I think that's fair game. And this setting is really appropriate because when Yip Man did relocate to Hong Kong, he'd lost all his money in Fatsan, and he had to work as a cleaner at the Restaurant Workers Association in Hong Kong. Nobody knew he was a Kung Fu master. And then one day there were some workers bragging about their martial arts prowess, and they saw Yip Man smirking and challenged him to show what he could do, and he did, and then he became a teacher in Hong Kong. So this kind of fits with that. So the writing on the door there, Wing Fung Chung Yip, which is the name of the company that he's taking over from, turning this space here. The guy showing him around, Can, is played by Pie Ngo Can Nin, who's of Vietnamese Chinese parentage. Kind of looks like a young version of my own Hung Kyun teacher, Mak Chi Kong. We see him later in the movie as well, in his day job. This kind of, the idea of painting his own signs, that's something that relates to a very Chinese tradition, the idea that you're a master both of martial arts and also of calligraphy, and that you're a literate man. And also something that we saw in the first film, Yip Man's son, Yip Chun, has inherited his artistic skill. Yip Chun, by the way, very much alive, somebody I've had a great pleasure to know over the years. I have to say, this movie really takes the ideas and the elements of the life of Yip Man and of his students and transposes it into a more dramatic setting. So it's not a documentary. It is actually by Roma in the background, the Swiss watch company, one of the film sponsors. Always tough getting sponsors for a period film because you can't get computer companies, you can't get high-tech companies. On street level, actually, not such a bad job of recreating Hong Kong. Lactogen there, infant formula. With all my many, many kids, I'm very familiar with that. Now, this was an actual phenomenon in colonial Hong Kong of this era, the water rationing. And I actually heard a story about Yip Man, the elderly Yip Man, that he was living at a place where they were rationing the water, and there were these thugs who were making people pay to use the tap. And they tried to do that with Yip Man. He snatched a wooden pole up and came after them with that. And after that, nobody dared to bully the locals. It may just be a story, but it's a good story. So, and this is the wife of Yip Man, Weng Sing, played by Lin Hung, reprising her role from the first Yip Man movie, and here pregnant with his second son, Yip Ching. In the first movie, Yip Chun, who we see here, played by Li Se, who was the same young actor who played Yip Chun in the first movie. He was a slightly younger kid in Yip Man, and we have the same actor playing him in the sequel. And Yip Ching, she's now pregnant with Yip Ching, who is the second son of Yip Man, who also became a Wing Chun instructor. Both Yip Chun and Yip Ching are still very active in the Kung Fu community. Yip Chun actually played a Kung Fu master in Yip Man, The Legend Begins, which was like a prequel to the first Yip Man movie. He's really Oh, by the way, for her pregnant scene, she actually had a heavy pad created, a prosthetic to put under her dress, Lin Hong, so she could more accurately recreate the feeling of being pregnant. The image here of Yip Man is very much like, we've only really got photographs of him as an older guy. I mean, he had no hair, he was bald and shaved his head. What other hair he had left, he shaved. So we know him as this little old man from all the photographs of him when he was teaching Bruce Lee. And it's interesting, it's almost like if you drew on top of that what the young Yip Man would look like. It's the same outline when he sits and smokes, the way he walks, the way he smiles. I think Donnie really captured that. Now here's this film's version of Wong Shenlong, who was one of the most famous students of Yip Man, and one of his disciples, David Peterson from Australia, a good friend of mine. A lot of stuff that I know about Wing Chun I learned from David. But Wong Shenlong I had the pleasure of meeting. He's sadly passed away, but I knew him quite well over the years. And he's very well represented as a young man here by the mainland Chinese actor Huang Xiaoming, Cantonese Wong Huming. Very unusual, actually, to have anything approaching a leading man type from China. Mainly, they're character actors from mainland China, and the leading players come from Hong Kong or Japan or Korea. And you know what? You can tell this guy has ability because his birthday is 2 days before mine. Mine's on the 15th of November, and his is on the 13th. So Huang Xiaoming made his film debut as a leading actor in Legend of the Dragon, which sadly, arguably, is the worst Sammo Hung film ever, and this is one of the best. So he's seen the full spectrum of Sammo Hung. And he played a young general in Feng Xiaogong's The Banquet, which we released as Legend of the Black Scorpion in America on DVD, did very well. He was the third lead in Dante Lam's Sniper, and he was also in The Message, which was a well-received period drama, thriller drama kind of movie in mainland China. I'd say a rare example of a mainland Chinese leading man. He'll next be seen in Ronnie Yu's Women Warriors of the Yang Family, which is being written by Edmund Wong, the son of Raymond Wong, Raymond Wong is the producer of Yip Man 1 and 2, and Edmund Wong wrote both Yip Man and this film. So as I mentioned, I knew the real Wong Shenlong, and I know this is actually an approximation of what really happened when Wong first met Yip Man and wanted to test his skills. At that point, Wong Shenlong was really only skilled in Western boxing, and he looked down on Kung Fu as being impractical and useless. And so he got a sharp realization when he actually encountered the fast hands and fists of Yip Man, and immediately became his disciple. I don't think the actual encounter, as described by Wong Shenlong, was as drawn out as this, but as I say, what we're seeing here is like a dramatic interpretation of real characters and real events in the life of Yip Man. But good casting with Huang Xiaoming. Also, Huang, same surname, Wong, as Wong Shenlong. And it's interesting, you've got the director of this movie, Yip Wai-sun, has the same surname as Yip Man. So there's a lot of, coincidences. There's only a finite number, seems to be only a finite number of very popular Chinese names. So there's no real familial connection. As I mentioned again, this is an interesting time lapse because this is actually later in the day, but there's been no dissolve. But it works. I think, Wilson is so familiar now with editing and the movement of the camera, he can get away with little tricks like this. These guys are coming in to challenge. Now, the guy second from the right is Sik Sulong, who was a child actor. He grew up with his family at Shaolin Temple, that did Shaolin Kung Fu, and he was in the Shaolin Popeye series. Actually, they call it Shaolin Popey, because I guess they were worried about being sued by the people that own the rights to Popeye. But it was him as a cute little kid doing Kung Fu. And he actually, years ago, partnered with Donnie in a movie that was produced, maybe directed by Wong Jing, which was called Do Sing, Saint of Gamblers. And you see him fighting alongside Donnie, but he's a little kid. Now he's taller than and much more heavy-set than he was. He's actually been studying in the US for the past few years and really speaks good English. The moment just before, if you look back, when Yip Man is really coming in close and he's got Man Sao, the asking hand. You see this kind of close-range combat and this principle, Latsao Jikzhong, the lost hand thrust forward. So the great thing about the film is even though they have taken, they actually have more flamboyant interpretation of Wing Chun to make the choreography interesting, they still stay true to the principles of the art, which I think has to be appreciated. Originally, the plan was to shoot this movie on the Bodyguards and Assassins Satbik Wai Sing Hong Kong set. I don't know if anybody's seen Bodyguards and Assassins, but it's a movie where they built period Hong Kong at another studio. But for some reason, that place wasn't available, so they're back here in Songjiang at the Shanghai studios. I think it would have been better for the film in terms of recreating a viable Hong Kong setting than you would have had if they would have actually been back on the Hong Kong set. There's Sik Sulong there. And I've never met him, but I've enjoyed his work over the years, and me and the kids loved watching those Shaolin Popeye films. It was him and this little fat kid together, and these guys are playing the first early disciples of Yip Man. And a nice example, we never really saw Yip Man as a teacher in the first film. He was not really, he taught the restaurant, he taught the factory workers at the cotton mill, but really because he had to, because they were being threatened by a bad guy. But he wasn't teaching out of the love of imparting the art. But that's what he's doing here. So we're seeing the evolution of Yip Man as a martial artist and as a teacher. You see them doing different movements out in the Mukjong. And this, by the way, is the Hong Kong version of the Zhong, where it's on a wooden frame, where it springs back. If you look back at Yip Man #1, it's actually the dummy set into the ground in Fat San. The conversation here about how to beat 10 guys, this references back to the scene when Yip Man beat the 10 Japanese karateka in the first Yip Man movie. There's like a direct reference to that. And when he says at the end, you know, what do? You run away. That was definitely a phrase Wan Shenlong used many times, is how to beat 10 guys, you run away. This is something every Kung Fu guy will relate to. The wife chasing him to go get the fees, training fees from the students. All the good instructors are bad at collecting fees. All the bad instructors are good at collecting fees. That's how you can tell a good instructor from a bad one. The good ones are always bad with money, you know, myself included. So here he is kind of taking all the fees and then, of course, letting people off. And this is something you always contend. I always thought martial art is a fantastic hobby, but it's a pretty tough living. It's a pretty lousy living, as Yip Man's character finds out. And that's probably as true now as it was then. So this is the first generation of students on the rooftop in Hong Kong. That's old Hong Kong money for you, actual old Hong Kong prop money. Very easygoing character. I mean, I think this is what made Yip Man so attractive to audiences, the character, because we've seen so many of these ferocious kung fu heroes who want revenge. You know, it's like fury. You know, they want vengeance. They want to kill. And here's a guy who, left to his own devices, would practice and teach Wing Chun for his own pleasure and raise his family. He's not a guy who's looking to be a hero. He's kind of forced to be a hero by outside circumstance. I think we all probably feel a bit that way. Here's Simon Yam as Chao Ching-chun. He was the businessman friend who supported Yip Man in the first movie. Here he is stealing a roast duck, which is actually the title of the very first movie ever made in Hong Kong, Stealing a Roast Duck. I don't know if that's intentional or not. And his son on the left here is Zhao Gongyu, played by Chen Ka-sing. Calvin Cheng is his name in English. Calvin, also the name of one of my sons. So you can tell just from that, he's a good guy. And actually, Calvin Cheng sings the title song for Yip Man 2, which you hear over the end credits. So talented singer and a talented actor. It's funny because in the first film, we actually saw Calvin Cheng, we saw the character of Zhao Gongyu kind of insisting that he should learn Kung Fu, trying to learn Kung Fu from Yip Man. But in this movie, he never uses it. Doesn't use it to try to save his father before. We never actually see him use any Wing Chun in the movie. So maybe he's moved on and he's pursuing other interests. But there was a lot of effort to make this a seamless sequel where they tried to get every actor who'd been in the first film to somehow to get them into this one to reprise their role from the earlier movie. It's very commendable. I think sometimes in this instance, it looks a bit of a... I don't know that Simon Yam's character really advances the plot here, but it certainly, you know, gives us another aspect to Yip Man's character, and it just shows how people have suffered, other victims of war have suffered after the war's over. There is still, you know, the walking wounded, and he's one of them with this bullet in the head, kind of like Jackie Cheung's character in John Woo's Bullet in the Head. there was actually a deleted scene. You see he was stealing a duck. And then there's a deleted scene, which I think is available elsewhere on our DVD, where where Yip Man actually brings his old friend some duck, and they sit, and obviously Simon Yam is never going to be in his right mind again, so he's just talking aimlessly, and Yip Man sits patiently listening to him. It's very good. It's interesting because, I mean, Simon Yam and Donnie Yen have worked together many times now. They worked on Yip Man together. They were on Tiger Cage way, way back when, one of the first contemporary cop movies Donnie was in fact, the first. And they worked together on Bodyguards and Assassins. And off camera, I don't know that they're particularly close. They work together as professionals. They respect each other as professionals, but they've never really become, best mates. And yet, when you see them work together as actors, they're so, particularly in the first film, in Yip Man, you would never know. You'd think that they were indeed good friends. And in fact, they just work together. I mean, they come and work together, and that's it. But this is, I think, the nature of being a fine actor. Here's at the newspaper, the Moi Yan Yatbo, everybody's newspaper. It's in the Manfai Daiha, the Manfai building. And this is kind of like, at the time in Hong Kong, newspapers, I mean, today they're popular. You have so many, for a small place, there's so many newspapers every day, each with a big entertainment section, so many gossip magazines. And, that's in, like, today, passion play. I'm not quite sure why it would be a passion play. Very odd choice of term. And our first look at Darren Shalavi playing Twister. It's kind of an odd name for a British boxing champion. Originally, they'd conceived the character as a black American, but ended up hiring a Western guy. Here's Dennis To Yu Hong, wearing quite an anachronistic Kangol-style hat. He played one of Fan Su Wong's followers in the first film, and here he's a Honggar student under Sammo Hung's character. Now, in reality, he's a student under Sin Guot Lam, who was one of the producers of Yip Man, and is a student of Yip Chun. Sin Guot Lam is a student of Yip Chun in the Wing Chun and of Lao Ga Leung, Liu Cha Liang in the Hong Kuen. So he's had the advantage, Dennis To, of learning both systems. He also plays Yip Man in Yip Man the Legend is Born. Great guy, very good martial artist. Don't know that he's quite come into his own yet as a leading man. And he's showing his tiger claw as he steps into battle. By the way, if you go back and notice, in the background there's a red rickshaw that comes by, and it's the same driver with different passengers within the space of like 10 seconds. That's what you notice if you see these films too many times like I do. So this is like a back alley Bey Mo, and definitely Wong Chun Leung, the character portrayed here, did have many of these fights, and he was known as Gong Sao Wong, basically the king of talking hands. Like, Gong Sao is like talking with your hands. Like, you don't need to talk about martial art, you talk with your hands. So he had many of these fights, and this has more of a real, it's somewhere in between the stylization of a kung fu encounter and using the environment like a real street fight would. So in the end, he's outmatched. But the real Wong Chun Leung fought many of these matches. So this rooftop actually constructed at Shanghai Film Studios, and it's not as far up off the ground as it seems to be, so you can get all these wonderful crane shots. The Chisao drills. Now, the guy leading the way in is a former member of the Jackie Chan stunt team, and I can't for the life of me remember his full name, but he's called Alu. Speaks a lot of languages, speaks perfect English, Cantonese, Mandarin, I think Korean. He's a cunning linguist, but he now comes in as the guy telling the bad news to Yip Man. And Yip Man is smoking again. Now, kids, don't try this at home. I want to mention to you that Yip Man died of cancer. So smoking in movies, in character, in a period film, okay. I don't know what this is, like 1932 fish market. Maybe it's a little bit beat up if it was actually constructed in 1932. We're now post-war, so yeah, maybe we're in late 1940s. We're in the would have been like 45, 46, the time when Hong Kong was getting back to its feet after the years of the Japanese occupation. See a lot of water on the ground. This is actually a location outside of Shanghai, just on the outskirts of Shanghai, and you're always contending with the weather. Kind of works because it's meant to be a fish market, so you'll have a lot of water anyway. Should mention the DP, a different DP to the one from Yip Man. For this film, they have Poon Hang Sang, great DP. He also shot Fearless for Jet Li and Kung Fu Hustle for Stephen Chow. Great cooperation between him and Sammo Hung, and edited by Zhang Gafai, who also edited the first Yip Man. And I think in this sequence that we're about to see, the skills of the director of photography in terms of camera movement, Sammo Hung as choreographer, and the editing by Zhang Gafai really come together, and you have to, appreciate the way to do any kind of martial arts action picture at this level. You've got a union of those people. And this is something, a lot of the times you meet guys coming in and saying, I'm a Kung Fu master, I should be in the movies, I can be great. And it's like, yeah, you can be if you can find a director, an action director, a DP, and an editor who will allow you to look great on camera. What you can do in tournaments and what you can do in your own school is one thing. What you can actually do on film will depend on the skills of that team that you have backing you. And a lot of martial arts masters don't get that right off the bat. This is a good example of where they really make every use you can of every interesting aspect of this location on the fish market. And this area, in the backstory, is operated by Hong Gambo's character. He's a kung fu master, but he's also borderline a gangster in that he has these guys following him and he's controlling a certain district. And it has to be said that during this period of, Hong Kong, this was actually the case. A lot of parents didn't want their kids to learn kung fu because they thought they would join the Haksai Wui, they would become gangsters. And also a lot of police corruption at this time as well. So this film very much reflects, in a dramatized way, the real situation. And now I think it's really interesting to see the distinction between Yip Man when he's kind of playing with students, showing his technique, teaching Kung Fu, and here where you see him really go into action, pretty much fighting for his life against a superior number of attackers, using these close-range techniques. And really, Donnie wonderfully exemplifies these close-range movements. There are people who've said, Wing Chun exponents, well, this or that is not exactly precisely, but the spirit of Wing Chun and its principles is so well reflected here. And it's a great commercial for, I said this when we were talking about Yip Man on the first DVD, that it's so well reflected here that I'm sure this is like another 90-minute, 100-minute commercial for Wing Chun, for Chinese Kung Fu in general, I hope, and particularly for Wing Chun. And just terrific, as I said before, the movement of the camera combined with the editing, just terrific. After all these years of Kung Fu movies, the idea that you can actually see shots, that you can see new ideas that have not been used before, after hundreds of martial arts films, just endlessly inventive, particularly Sammo Hung, is an endlessly inventive choreographer, always coming up with new ideas. So what we found in the first film was there's a sequence when Donnie's fighting thugs in the cotton mill, and he snatches a bamboo pole to use as the classical weapon, two classical weapons of Wing Chun, which is the Luk Din Bun Guan, the 6.5-point pole. He doesn't actually take a pole with him, he finds one. And here, exact same thing is about to happen, in that while fighting these guys, he gets hold of a couple of these fish knives and uses them as the Bat Jam Do, the eight cut knives of Wing Chun. These are the two weapons, the Luk Din Bun Guan, the 6.5-point pole, and the Bat Jam Do, the 8 cut knives. And the interesting thing about in Chinese, they never say sword, like probably we'd translate that to say swords in English, but in Chinese, anything which has a single edge to it is a knife, not a sword. A sword is a gim, that would be like what we would think of more like an épée kind of thing, and this is a do. And he's got these do, and he's holding them and using them exactly like you would the Bat Jam Do, but they are fish knives. So this carries on an idea from the first film. I think Yip Man is not somebody who would walk around carrying weapons because he's a gentleman. So the only thing, when he's presented with these insuperable odds, he'll take up a weapon. And in the first film, in the cotton mill, it was the pole, and here in the fish market, he's using the knives. You know what the thing is, there's a lot of people, younger guys in China now, maybe pound for pound in their 20s, as good at martial arts as Donnie. But the reason that he's a star is the fact that now he can completely hold these scenes. By the way, you notice that he's turning the edge of the blade away. There's a very nice insert shot there because he doesn't want to kill anybody. But there's very few people now, I think, who can... Look at the shot where that guy goes down. I've never seen that before. As I say, amazing. Sammo Hung, even in his late age, still coming up with new amazing ideas. There's actually this is Dennis versus Don. It's Yip Man versus Yip Man, I guess, because they both played the same character in different films. They did actually people tried to cause a feud between Dennis and Donnie, between Dennis To and Donnie Yen, trying to push Dennis to say, oh, whose Wing Chun is better? Is this guy better? Is that guy better? And I think Dennis dealt with it very well in interviews. He just said, I had a great experience working with Donnie Yen on Yip Man 1 and Yip Man 2. He didn't let get drawn into it. Here's the return of Fan Wong as Gam Shanxiao, a northern stylist. We saw him in the first film. This kind of seemed a bit forced to me. They were out of time. He was actually meant to fight some of the guys, but instead they didn't have time for that, so he has to do that little display. I'd like to have seen him take on some of the guys. It's kind of a coincidence that he should be working at the fish market and come in at this particular moment. As I say, they really made every effort to shoehorn in every surviving actor from the first movie. Originally, his character was killed in the first cut of Yip Man. He played this antagonistic northern stylist who challenges and loses to Yip Man and becomes a thief. Now he's obviously come to Hong Kong and redeemed himself. Kind of against the odds he would show up at this exact moment, but it's only a movie. And here he is, the great Sammo Hung, action director of Yip Man 1 and now co-star and action director of Yip Man 2. He actually shot a cameo for the original opening of Yip Man 1 where he plays a rival Kung Fu master who's about to have a duel with Yip Man, and just then they get news that Yip Man's wife has given birth to Yip Chun. And so they postpone the duel, and in fact, even in the deleted scenes on the DVD and elsewhere, you never get to see Sammo Hung in that role. I think what they wanted to do was really save him for this movie. Point out, Fan Wong's character speaks Mandarin dialect, and everybody else is speaking Cantonese in the regular cut of the movie. There's a full Mandarin version for the China market, but in the Hong Kong version, his character, being from the north, speaks the Mandarin dialect. And he's being portrayed slightly as a country bumpkin, which I think at the time was how people in Hong Kong in the 1940s treated people from mainland China. Obviously now that's all changed. Originally, I remember Donnie telling me that they had an idea that Sammo Hung's character would be the father of Lau Ka-leung, the Shaw Brothers' legendary actor-director Lau Ka-leung. His father, Lau Jam, was obviously a very famous Hong Kyun master under Lam Sai-wing, Butcher Wing. And in the original idea for Yip Man 2, a friend would invite Yip Man to try out as a movie stuntman. And there he meets Lau Jam, and, oh, you're from Fat San, you do Wing Chun, I do Hong Kyun, and they have like a duel. And it's kind of broken up by Lei Hoi Chun, who's the father of Bruce Lee, an actor and an opera performer, and was a friend. He was a friend of Yip Man in real life, and that's how Bruce Lee met Yip Man. So I think the problem with it was that the storyline was going to be dealing with all these real life people, such as Lau Jam, such as Lei Hoi Chun, and so you kind of boxed in a bit. So they decided they want to be careful also not to have potentially causing any offense to Lao Sifu by how his father is depicted. Here's Kent Cheng, Zheng Juxi, who had previously worked with Donnie on Flashpoint, Do Foreseen. Now, here's an interesting thing. Both he and Sammo, in different films, have played my great Kung Fu Grandmaster, Lam Sai-wing, Ju Wing, Pork Butcher Wing. Sammo played the role in Magnificent Butcher, and Kent in the Once Upon a Time in China series, most memorably, you might say, in the first of those films. And Kent's career goes back to the classic films of Zhang Jie, of Zheng Jit at Shaw Brothers. He's in Men from the Monastery and Heroes 2. Police station here actually inside a studio. Now this role here, they actually, Superintendent Wallace, they wanted me for this. And it was too long in Shanghai for too little money, and it would have been fun to do. Plus, the character is such an asshole. And I mean, people will tell you I'm one in real life, so why should I, play one on screen to confirm the truth? So the other thing is, I really feel with this movie, all the British characters in the film are such broad caricatures. And I know Hollywood films do the same with Asians. Well, they're wrong and we're wrong if we have caricatures. We should have more texture. And if you look at the first movie, they went to such lengths to give the Japanese characters, and particularly Miura, the general, is a man of honor. And all the Westerners here are kind of depicted as these one-note imperialists. Out of the actors, most of them are pretty atrocious. This guy's not bad. Charles Mayer, British, had been a TV actor and done some supporting roles, and now resides in Shanghai and works in theater there. And he's okay in this role. I mean, not as good as I would have been, but, he does a decent job. So all the way through this dialogue sequence, we have Fan Wong speaking Mandarin. For some reason, every time they've actually written his name phonetically in the posters and arts, he's Fan Sui, S-U-I. And I always thought Fan Wong, Siu being small, should be S-I-U. In the first film, there's a very distinctive noise when Yip Man whacks him on the ear with the pole in the fight in the cotton mill. And now he's deaf in that ear as a result. And that's a really nice bit of continuity. If you're the kind of person that likes continuity between films, this is a sequel for you. Here again we see Lin Hung Doi Lam, playing the wife of Yip Man, given a lot more to do in this film than she was in the first. She was a mainland Chinese model, made a very impressive acting debut in Yip Man. More famous in Hong Kong, I have to say, as the girlfriend of Aaron Kwok Fu Sing. And actually, Aaron was meant to work with Donnie on Bodyguards and Assassins, Subject Wai Sing. But in the end, there was a schedule clash and the part was played by Leon Lai Ming. Nice choice of angle there. This could be like a nothing little scene, and they got a nice shot there from up the stairs. That's the difference between a classy film and a potboiler. Anyway, Lin Hong was born in Nanjing, and so she would have had some experience of Japanese, a family I'm sure would have had some experience of Japanese oppression, because it was so badly treated during the war. Later studied costume design and performing arts at Soochow University, and went on from there to a modeling career and onto the screen. It's interesting here when you see Fancy Wong's character advising Donnie. He says, well, this young guy, if he gets a wife and family, he'll grow up and he'll change his ways the way I did. And it's interesting he's saying that to Donnie, because as a 20-year friend of Donnie, I think I can say absolutely that advice is true in Donnie's case, because he's always had amazing ability, and he's been a good friend to me over the years. But I think the transformation in him from when he met Cece and he had his babies with her, he's just become a different guy in a positive way. And my goodness, his career has really, really benefited. Lin Hung here again. She moved to Shanghai in 1999, and she was the runner-up in the China National Model Competition. And then in 2002, she won an award, Best Fashion Model, and she was but she could have just stayed there, like as a flower vase, as a fahzhong. But she decided to really make some more of herself and accepted the roles and the role of Yip Man's wife in these movies. And it's quite challenging, and she really rose to the occasion. I think she can become a really interesting actress if she decides to stay at it. This is supposedly Tsim Sha Tsui Police Station. For those of you who know the geography of Hong Kong and Kowloon, it's the major tourist and shopping center, and it was that already at the time this film is set. Actually, the father of one of Yip Man's other famous students, William Cheung Jok-hing, was the chief of police, but that was later. So this is earlier in the history of Yip Man in Hong Kong. So I guess if it had been later, he could have actually called on his student's father to help get them out of trouble. So this is kind of a new relationship we're seeing for Yip Man, the relationship between teacher and student. We never really see it. In the first film, he has friends, and he has like a group of students at the cotton mill. But in this whole thing of having Sifu and Todai, Sifu is like fatherly teacher, and that's what we're seeing here, a fatherly teacher. The way that he treats his fellows is good. This guy's great, the newspaper owner. I think he doesn't get a huge amount to do in the movie, but what he does, he carries off well. And I'm really amazed. If anybody sees my teacher, Max Sifu, in any photographs online, how much he looks like him. The lady playing Kam's wife is played by a mainland actress, Tian Rui. Again, not much to do, but what she does well. Fancy Wong began his career as a child actor at Shaw Brothers, and he wasn't a big star child actor, but he was working because his father, Fan Mui-san, was a major character player and a very reliable side cast actor at Shaw Brothers. Later, of course, he reinvented himself as this muscular martial arts hero. This is typical Hong Kong accommodation of this era. Should say, with the camera work here, the DP from the first film, Chan Tzu-kwan, came back to this movie to operate for Pun Hang Seng, and obviously, who was the DP? Obviously, being DP is the prime position, and operating is a secondary role. So I think it shows the good bond between the people in that particular world of the DP of the Sipping Sea, that Chan Sifu didn't mind to come back to help Pun Sifu on this film, rather than insisting that he come back as director of photography. This was the 10-pound prosthetic belly on Lin Hong, so she could get the feeling of being pregnant. And I think shows the degree to which she was serious about playing this. A lot of the times models come into movies and they kind of play models, and she didn't want to do that. Here we are at the Da Loi Toi fighting tournament. This is the setting is a Chinese tea house, and indeed they were used for this kind of match. As I say, everything is an exaggerated version. It's Lam Hak Ming talking here, plays Lam Sifu, long-time Sammo Hung cohort. I had so much fun working with him on The Medallion. He was one of the assistant directors on this film and on Yip Man. Fung Ha-on on the right there is Cheng Sifu, veteran bad guy kung fu actor, best known for his work at Golden Harvest. Lo Mong on the left is Law Sifu, Shaw Brothers star of the late era, one of the 5 Venoms. I just worked with him on Beach Spike, so he's now a good friend, and Sifu to my eldest son. See all the birds there. Now, that bird flu did away with that, but it used to be all of the... If you look at the beginning of Hard Boiled, they're bringing in, even in the late era, bringing in the bird cage to the tea houses. A twitching gesture you see Lo Mong do, something that Siu Hao, Little Monkey, another actor who worked with Lao Sifu on Mad Monkey Kung Fu and worked with Donnie and I Monkey, he has that in real life. But if you look, every time Lo Mong is about to go into action, he's kind of twitching. Siu Hao really did that, so I think that's where he copied it from. So this is like, I remember looking at the trailer at the Hong Kong Film Mart for this movie, and it actually just showed this little bit at the beginning, these guys fighting on the table. I was like, wow, I really want to see this movie. Look, there's Calvin Cheng. He's like Jimmy Olsen to Donnie's Super Yip Man. He's there with the camera. He's going to look at Super Yip Man in action. So this is, somebody mentions, while you're just walking up like that, different teachers would probably jump, run, kick, flip, something to show off their physical prowess. And Yip Man is a much more practical person, steps up, introduces himself, introduces his teacher as Chan Hua-sun. Chan Hua-sun is like money changer Hua. This is the character played by Casanova Wong Kar-sat-fa, in Sammo Hung's movie Warriors 2. So if you go back and look at that classic Wing Chun themed film that Sammo made at Golden Harvest, you can see the teacher to whom Yip Man refers, and that's Chan Hua-sun. And classically you'd come out and you would introduce yourself as a Kung Fu master, name your style, perhaps where you came from, Fat San, and your teacher, your lineage. So I wanted to cast Lo Mong, see on the left here, in Beach Spike, and the director, Tony Tang, said, I haven't seen him in anything for a long time. How's he look? What's he doing? And I for some reason, I didn't even know Lo Mong as it happened. I just read the script and said, this character, Uncle Dao, Dosop, is perfect for Lo Mong. And I just could see him in my mind. So I met him, and I knew he was great, and he wanted to do it. And luckily, he'd been working on television. And I guess Tony had seen him on TV and thought, well, is he still doing features? And then Yip Man 2 came out at just the right time. And Tony, the director, went to see Yip Man 2 just to see the film. And he went, well, that's Lo Mong. Oh, great. And he was so good in the movie. Now, of course, you can't imagine anybody else playing the part in Beach Spike. He's a monkey kung fu stylist here. This is the particular style, and hence the fact that he's taken on Siu Hao's twitch. And he's doing his thing there. But he's actually an expert of monkey kung fu, very acrobatic. Probably a lot more use of the obvious use of the wires here than there was in the first Yip Man movie. Now, Lo Mong is actually a native of Hong Kong, a student of Southern Mantis Kung Fu. He entered the film industry as the bodyguard to Shaw Brothers director Chang Che, and went with him to Taiwan when Chang formed his own company there. And he had supporting roles in Chang's films. And then he was at some screening at Shaw Brothers of one of those movies where he had a sidecast role. And Run Run Shaw, the owner of the studio, every time Lo Mong's face came up, he went, star quality, every time he came on the screen. And so in 1978, Lo Mong got his big shot. He got cast as Toad in the classic 5 Venoms, Dok, and also to show off his Mantis Kung Fu skill in Invincible Shaolin. So later you can see him as a hitman in John Woo's Hard Boiled. Here's Fung Ha-on. He's the son of character actor Fung Fung, who was a major player in like the 50s and 60s as a character actor in Hong Kong films. He's actually, for Kung Fu fans out there, he's the guy who referees Jackie Chan's fight at the end of Young Master, in which Fung Ha-on also plays a villain. He's the brother of Fung Bo-bo, a child actor who's a girl, a child actor who played Fong Sai-yuk, the Kung Fu hero Fong Sai-yuk, who also hails from the Fat San, Nanhai, Lam Hoi area of China in black and white films. He's using Bagua, which is a system based on the geometric 8 sides of Chinese Bagua, which also comes into Chinese geomancy and feng shui. And it's like, I actually went to try out some lessons in Bagua at Hong Kong's Zheng Momun, the same school that you see Jet Li and has in Fearless, and Bruce Lee had in Fist of Fury. They have one a Zheng Momun here in Hong Kong, and I tried to Jingwu Men. I went there and tried to get into Bagua. I just could not. Walking the circle, doing all these twisting hand movements, I couldn't get the hang of it. I'll save that for the next life. Stick with the Hong Kyun and the Chen Tai Chi. Notice all the way through these fights the way that Yip Man keeps control of the center line, which is the key principle of Wing Chun. If you can control the center line, you can protect yourself and you can attack your opponent along his center line. So some of the movements are flamboyant, but the principles of Wing Chun, they stay true to the principles of Wing Chun. And Fong Ha-an also one of the musician assassins in Kung Fu Hustle, and he worked with Donnie on 14 Blades, Gum Yi-Wai. It's amazing, really, isn't it? These older Hong Kong actors are still so athletic. It says a lot about the longevity you can get from proper Kung Fu training. So understandably, nobody else is quick to jump on the table, having seen how quickly these two were demolished. And so here, Sammo steps up, my idol. I'm not ashamed to say it, Sammo Hung, my hero, my idol. And Wing Chun versus Hong Kyun. This is what we'd all been waiting for. Two styles from Fatzan, both from the south of China, and I think Sammo Hung, one of the great experts in depicting Hong Kyun on camera, and Donnie Yen, obviously, great now at showing Wing Chun. There's the Kyu Sao, the classic movement there from Sammo, and it's incredible to see these two, that we actually got these two clashing using traditional martial arts. They fought in SPL, Sapalong, using more MMA style, and now we get to see them fight using Kung Fu. And it's just the hand techniques, both styles emphasizing powerful hand techniques, obviously showing a common root in the Shaolin. Now, I think Max Sifu has been holding out on me because I never learned the double drop kick yet. I haven't got that one down. So maybe I'll get that next week. Fujiao hand technique from Sammo. I felt that both Yip Man and Hong Chun Nam, Sammo's character, are kind of equal in this, that Yip Man has finally met his match. And the only thing that gives him a slight advantage may be the fact that it's proven later that Hong Sifu's got asthma or some other ailment, so he's not completely at his full strength. But I got to say, as a long-time Hong Kyun exponent, I was glad to see, though I greatly respect the Wing Chun style, I was really happy to see that the two are treated equally. We were all of us slightly concerned to see how Hong Ga was going to be depicted in this film, because, it would have been sad if it was depicted in a derogatory way, and people came out going, oh, Hong Kyun is no good, we should just do Wing Chun. I think there's something to be said for all Southern Chinese martial arts. Now, I can't, this is a bit video gamey for me. I can't move my hands as fast as this. By the way, this is Sammo coming out. Talk about the longevity of Kung Fu actors. This is Sammo just having come out from heart surgery. And I heard he was announced to do the film. Then I heard he was in hospital, and we were all very worried. And he came back in fine fettle. Donnie landing in the goat riding stance, and Sammo in Sei Ping Ma. By the way, I guess Lo Mong was doing two films, because you can see this shot is not him. In the background, it's another guy as a stand-in. I guess he was working on another movie, or he couldn't come on that particular day. So there you have the two contrasting stances from Hong Kyun, Hong Ga. Hong Ga is Hong's family, Hong Kyun is Hong's fist. Sammo's probably shown every single Chinese fighting style in film at one time or the other. The film where he most memorably shows off the Hong Kyun style is Magnificent Butcher, Lam Sai Wing, where he plays, as I mentioned, my great-great-great-great-grandmaster of this style, one of the most famous students of Wang Fei Hong, Lam Sai Wing, and he plays that in the movie directed by Yin Wo Peng, and really shows off the different aspects of the style. Though I think it has to be said, he's probably devoted more attention to Wing Chun with his film Warriors 2 and Prodigal Son, which deal with the life of Leung Jan, who's kind of, I say, the Wing Chun equivalent of Wang Fei Hong as for Hong Kyun. Wang Fei Hong is the great legendary guy who everybody thinks of related to Hong Kyun. And then before, I would say Leung Jan, because of those two films, was the most famous name for Wing Chun. Now, of course, it's Yip Man. From these films, from the prequel, and from the forthcoming Wong Kar-wai movie, The Grand Master. Here was the first time we realized that Hong Sifu was not well. Actually, there's a very similar scene in Yip Man, The Legend is Born, where his character is depicted as being as ailing and has to take medicine. So maybe I don't know who took whose idea from where. There's actually a long a cut sequence, a deleted scene that's elsewhere on the DVD, leading into Sammo at dinner. It's a wonderful single shot showing how he runs the fish market and him taking money from his followers, from his hengdai, and kind of taking care of business and the whole bustle of the place. It's a shame it had to be cut, and it led into him looking at the newspaper here. This is how most people in Hong Kong found out about Chinese kung fu and kung fu heroes, from reading in the newspapers. Look on the deleted scenes. Great lead-ins, a shot. The one shot I wish they would have left in, because it really gave a bit of scale to the movie. The newspapers, actually the adventures of Wong Fei-hung were serialized in the newspapers. That's how people got inspired to make the black and white Wong Fei-hung movies, which were the first big martial art movies that that kind of created the genre in Hong Kong. And you actually do see some movie magazines for sale here. And worth pointing out that Sammo Hung's grandfather, Hung Chung-ho, was actually directing movies during this era and shooting films in Shanghai, later in Hong Kong, to be released around the region. So we see the students at Huang Xiaoming. He's also in the Uber propaganda film, the propaganda film to end all propaganda films, Founding of the Republic, which Donnie is also in. He plays the guy who composed the Chinese national anthem, the modern Chinese national anthem. But that movie has Jackie Chan, Jet Li, everybody literally coming to the aid of the party. He's also in Chen Kaiger's film Sacrifice. And coming up for him is a new film from my friend Gordon Chan, Chan Ga-seung, which is the sequel to Painted Skin, Wape, which is a film that Gordon directed that Donnie starred in. And Donnie's not in this movie. I think it's with Takeshi Kaneshiro and some other mainland Chinese actors, and Huang Xiaoming. The English title is Wall Painting, and I know it's based also on these classic Chinese ghost stories. The same writer who wrote Chinese Ghost Story wrote Wape, or Painted Skin. It's actually very difficult to get films made in China. The censors don't want any film about supernatural elements, but if it's by a classical author, you can. This is a pretty good, on street level, I think a nice recreation of a back street. They've recreated a Hong Kong back street quite effectively. I think it's the wide panoramic shots. It feels more like Guangzhou than it does like Hong Kong. I think with these films, Donnie got a rare opportunity as an actor to develop a character consistently over a series of films. I hope they do Yip Man 3. There's no immediate plan to. They want to wait for the glut of Yip Man movies to come and go, and then potentially do a number 3, which would be about the relationship between Yip Man and his student Bruce Lee, Lei Siulong. But in the first film, you've got his character, Yip Man, kind of is constantly, there's a scene when there's people actually outside of Yip Man's home chanting and saying, open a school, open a martial arts school, and he's really reluctant to. He's kind of has to be pushed. Here, everybody's telling him to close his martial arts school, and he refuses to close it. So you have like a definite evolution of him as a character, and I think it's rare, and he rises to the occasion. But it's unusual that you actually get to do that as an actor. And a lot of the times in Hong Kong films, when you do get sequels, in some ways they contradict or they're at odds with the film before. I mean, sequels so rarely work anyway, but in Hong Kong particularly, there's been a tendency to rush out a follow-up to capitalize on the initial success of the film. But this film, they really took the time and painstakingly made sure that they made films that it plays like one long movie if you run them side by side. This would be a great double bill. I hope one day I get to see Yip Man 1 and Yip Man 2 on the big screen where they belong, run back to back. And eventually Yip Man 3. The sign there, gold sign, is Yu Dong Mo Lam, reputation across the martial arts world. The student there doing a version of Gongji Futfukun. Never really heard a good translation of Gongji Futfukun. Really like tempting the tiger form, character eye boxing form. There's all different translations, but that Gongji is what we all know it as. This is very much old-time Sifu, Sammo there taking the money. And a very anachronistic poster in the background there. He's got the poster for the Sonny Liston Cassius Clay, a.k.a. Muhammad Ali bout, which wasn't going to happen for a good few decades to come. But anyway, as I say, only a film. I think it's great to have these two in the film because it's not just the fact that they can fight. It's not just the fact that they have their bona fides as kung fu exponents. But now in their life and career, they're such good actors that Donnie, as an actor, can go toe-to-toe with Sammo. I mean, I think Sammo's always been fantastic as an actor, director. producer. I really hope that the industry can find another project for him to direct. I know he's working on he's producing and he's actually directing a film about the opera, an action film set in the world of opera at the moment that's going to be shot, I think, on this same studio. But he needs to direct again because he's just so gifted as a director and also as an actor. But as I say, these two now, both in terms of martial arts and in terms of thespian skill, they're on a par, so they can actually have this kind of confrontation. I thought it was like, and again, you have an arc where their relationship begins with hostility to grudging respect, and by the end, of course, they're brothers in arms. They become like comrades. So it's nice to have that arc. I would like to have seen this fight go on a bit longer, because I think there's one thing that you can't have too much of. It's Donnie Yen and Sammo Hung fighting using kung fu, but that's just my taste. Now I wonder if this is like a Kung Fu Hustle reference, the big lollipop. Because Sammo was actually the choreographer on that film. It clashed with Stephen Chow, and he left halfway through. And these kids, they really do look like they could be the offspring of Sammo Hung. They're well cast. Now watch this. This is funny. The fat kid, he's there, and then when Sammo takes him, this is what you get working with kids. You see there, he's kind of starting to cry a bit. And now he's smiling when you go from this angle, and now he's crying. And Sammo moves him away from the camera, this experienced director, and it's good because that's probably Donnie's best take. So he saves the shot by doing that. The moral of the story is don't work with animals and fat kids. So this is like kind of lighter side of Hung's character. And by the way, Hung's wife is played by Lei Mei Fang, who had a cameo in Yip Man. She's one of the workers at the cotton mill, and she also has a decent role in Choi Soo-ming's movie Champions. She's one of the players in that film. So Yip Chun, his artistic skills, this is continuing on from what we saw him drawing in the first movie. He actually grew up to become an accountant, and I think from a lot of his adult life, his primary livelihood was accountancy, and he was just doing Wing Chun as a hobby, and then realized in time that you could actually, that there was great interest in Wing Chun internationally, and that he was in the lineage, the most famous name in the style, other than that of Bruce Lee, was Yip Man. So he became a full-time teacher. And I met him in England years ago. He would come, he was the guest of Samuel Kwok, who was one of his students who was based in Manchester. And so he would come over and give seminars, so I would meet him, interview him for my magazine, and generally, got to know and appreciate him. And it was interesting because when I met Sin Quat Lam, who was his student, with Yip Chun, and when they were doing Yip Man, The Legend Begins, Yip Chun said, well, you should call Bey Sidai, elder student, because I'd actually trained with Yip Chun many years before Sin Quat Lam had, but I never followed him to the degree that Sin Sifu does. This scene was originally written for the ending of Yip Man, and you'd see there was like a bookend where you saw an older version of Yip Man, an aged-up Donnie, talking to Wong Chun-leung and also a young Bruce Lee, and talking about his philosophy of kung fu, talking about experiences. Here, what happens is he actually starts telling Wong Chun-leung the story of Yip Man. He tells him Yip Man 1. And that was kind of the idea originally when this was written by Edmund Wong for the first movie. And a lot of the stuff that they couldn't do in the first film, they saved for this one, using Sammo Hung as a rival kung fu master and having Bruce Lee in the film, which we see later. And this is like kind of this scene, which is originally part of the bookends of Yip Man 1. And when they decided not to do that, to open the film and close the film in Fat Zan, they actually saved the scene, and we see it here. Now, I should mention that actually on the set when they were shooting, Donnie was speaking Cantonese and Huang Xiaoming was speaking Mandarin. Donnie understands Mandarin. I don't know that Xiaoming speaks Cantonese at all, but they're such good actors that you don't know that they're operating in different languages. This was something you saw happening a lot back in Golden Harvest. Back in the day, you'd have Korean actors, Mandarin speakers, Cantonese speakers, and occasionally English speakers, Japanese speakers, all operating in the same scene, and they would dub the whole film later. It's like a little catchphrase from Yip Man, Meng Ba Mei, that you would actually, do you understand or you don't understand? And he's just very sweet-natured, and it's nice to see the bond that really existed in real life between Yip Man and Wong Chun-leung. Wong Chun-leung, to me, the preeminent person who really spread the word of Yip Man in the modern era. He was Bruce Lee's teacher, and he had a lot of great students, including David Peterson, who, in my mind, if you look at somebody as an exponent, as an archivist, and as somebody who propagates the art, is the foremost Wing Chun teacher in the world, definitely of the Wong Shen Leung tradition. Now, I don't know that ever there was an instance that Yip Man had to come and teach in the street. Maybe those people who are much more familiar with Wing Chun than me, history might be able to kind of give me some clarity on that. But I didn't know this was the case, but it certainly makes for an interesting sequence here when they're kind of obviously not enough room upstairs in the apartment, so they have to come and train here. As I say, the developing relationship between the two characters, the two masters, Yip Sifu and Hung Sifu. It's always good in the films where you've got somewhere to go with that. A lot of kung fu movies, unfortunately, good guy, bad guy. Look at the old fellas in the background doing the Tai Chi, Taget Kyun, doing the Toi Sao, pushing hands. That's in the area I need to get into. I've been playing forms, but I haven't done much pushing hands with the Tai Chi. I got into that a little late in my martial arts practice. This is all on the back lot at Shanghai Film Studios. I actually think Shanghai Film Studios is really good for showing Shanghai, which it's done in many movies, including Kung Fu Hustle and The White Countess and, Mummy 3. Less good at showing Hong Kong, and they now have a fantastic Hong Kong street set elsewhere in Shanghai. So I'm sure that will be used for a good many Hong Kong-based films, because it's becoming increasingly expensive and prohibitive to actually shoot Hong Kong films in Hong Kong. Preparing the boxing ring for the match. This is all inside a set at the studio. This was all constructed specifically for the film. And here comes, with his entourage, the boxing champion, played by Darren Chalavi. Kind of mixed feelings. He's my prodigal son. I've known Darren since he was 13 or so. He was a skinny kid, and he dreamed of being an action star, and he would send me photos of himself stripped to the waist, flexing. He didn't have as much muscle then as he does now. I think my girlfriend at the time thought it was a bit odd that a Middle Eastern boy from Manchester was sending me half-naked photos. But that was Darren trying to be the new Van Damme. And he used to come to my house, and my nickname for him was, I called him the VHS Vampire, because he would sleep on the floor in my living room, and during the night he would copy all of my martial art films onto tape, take them back to Manchester. But my God, what a great natural athlete he was and is. He's a great athlete. He worked for me on the first film where I was line producer, which was called Guns N' Roses, and he was my assistant, and we got him a fighting role in the film. And I'll never forget the look on his face. He was like, my goodness, I'm in a movie, I'm in a real movie. And he then became part of a group of us at that time, Mark Houghton, Winston Ellis, Western guys who were involved with martial arts and movies, and he kind of came up through that. Unfortunately, after I relocated to Hong Kong, he also came, and we kind of parted ways. It was a difficult situation for him. I mean, it was like, I think, kind of like the bullying kung fu master and the student who's kind of caught between the two of them, and he chose one path. And our relationship, which had been very close up to then, never really recovered. But I look at him now in this, and I'm very proud of him. I think he's done a good job here, and it's like it's a shame in a way that we hadn't been closer for the years in between. But people choose the path. People choose, as Donnie tells one of the characters in Yip Man 1, young men choose the paths they walk. He's had a decent career as a bad guy. I mean, he was in Tai Chi 2 opposite Wu Jing for Yuen Woo-ping, Blood Moon with Gary Daniels, which was actually directed by the action director Tony Leung, who directed the first, co-action directed with Sammo the first Yip Man. He was actually the director of Blood Moon, and he had a similar role in I Spy with Eddie Murphy, similar role to what he plays here. He plays a boxer in that movie opposite Eddie Murphy. He does a good job. Here are the students doing another. Again, it's Gung Ji Fu Kun in the ring, and this is actually in the movie after Twister has fought and won his boxing match. And the way it's played out now, it almost feels like he hasn't yet got into the ring. And they actually, I think you'll see on the deleted scenes, there's a scene when we show his power, he gets in with an opponent. He's obviously far superior to that guy and knocks him out. And now after that, he's coming here, I barely broke a sweat. And afterwards, they're having this kung fu display, and then this leads into the confrontation with him and the kung fu guys. But this is a very classical performance of a gongji. All the Hong Kong students who are watching the movie will certainly relate to it. And again, I really wonder why Westerners, they had to have so many caricature Westerners. I mean, you can blame Wilson Yip for this, that he brought these guys in and said, please act this way, please play this really broad. I do think there's a case for the fact that if you hire experienced actors, they will fight their corner better, and they will bring you some more nuance. But I think here it was like they brought in guys, some of whom, had some experience, some not. And it's a case of, okay, we'll give you what you want. And in this case, they obviously wanted these kind of one-note imperialists. And I think it's to the film's detriment. And this was picked up on in the West when the film was reviewed. And, you could have actually found a way, particularly with Twister, to give him a bit more soul rather than just have him as this kind of boxing machine that he comes in, this kind of pantomime performances. This is Brian Thomas Burrell, very good Cantonese speaker. His Cantonese name is Bao Wai Kit. Nice guy. Certainly as he's playing here, not really delivering as an actor. It's a very broad role. By the way, the full name of Twister is Taylor the Twister Milosh. So I guess he's of Greek extraction. And it's kind of ironic that he's playing a puncher in this because, for most of the time we all knew Darren. He was great at kicking, very flexible, very good at athletics, very good at gymnastics, but he wasn't really, his hand techniques were not that great. But probably his two most famous roles are I Spy and this, where he plays a boxer and he doesn't get to kick at all. This is, it's not his fault, but, the lines here, like we were walking around after we saw the film a couple of times, my friends and I at our Kung Fu training would be doing movements and going, now that is power. And, kind of imitating the lines of dialogue. And it's just tough. If you're an actor, what do you do with that? Not much. By the way, from this point on, it's been noticed, the film follows the plot of Rocky IV very closely. So make of that what you will. I guess that was, the different directions they could have gone. That was the one. And that is power. So, Darren went from this to doing a Steven Seagal movie in Bulgaria called Born to Raise Hell. Which I think might be on my gravestone. But anyway, let's see. I'm interested to see his performance in that film. And definitely, this movie has been seen as widely internationally as any kung fu movie of recent vintage. So at least in terms of his physicality and presence, people will know about him, even if he's not really called to do that much as an actor. So, by the way, the guy that he would have fought, talk about funny names. He's Twister, and the guy that he beat was a Bubo Bluster. Bubo Bluster is the guy in the deleted scene who he beats in a boxing match. This is like really, talk about a great moment for anybody who's a fan of kung fu films. First of all, first takes out Wang Chenlong, which Wang Chenlong actually in real life did fight and beat a Western boxer. So that's actually playing with history a bit. Now here, he gets to take on Sammo Hung and Donnie Yen at the same time. I mean, how much of a dream come true is that for anybody? This is what Darren. 1 minute he's sleeping on my lounge floor, and videotaping, copying Sammo Hung films and Donnie Yen movies, and now here he is in the ring with them. So it just shows, be careful what you wish for. It's pretty hard making movies in Hong Kong, particularly if you're a Westerner and haven't necessarily done that many Hong Kong kung fu movies. And I think Darren acquitted himself very well. I remember being on the phone with Donnie when they were shooting this, and he said they got this kid in this movie, and he remembers meeting me, Donnie Yen, when you brought me over to England to do a seminar. And I remember it very clearly. In fact, on YouTube, where we had Donnie teaching Hong Kong style action, and Darren was probably, I think, 12, 13, very young, and he actually turned up and attended the seminar, and here he is, significantly bigger than he was then as the main villain. Now, as a Kung Fu exponent myself, I would say that if you take a Chinese Kung Fu player and put him up against a boxer, if you make the Kung Fu guy wear gloves and abide by the rules of boxing, he'll probably lose. And you actually see a sequence much like that. Well, there was a sequence much like that shot for Drunken Master 2, and that was cut out from the finished film. But if you allow the Kung Fu exponent to kick, to punch, to use different hand techniques and different throws and grappling techniques which are inherent to Chinese martial art, and your Western boxer is just allowed to punch, then unless the Western the boxer is very quick and very fast to knock out his opponent, then he's going to be on the losing end. I mean, you can put me in the ring with anybody. If I can kick them in the knee, if I can kick them in the thigh, if I can grapple with them and choke them, then just boxing alone is going to be, it's going to be difficult to win a match. So here they've kind of built up Twister as this killing machine and finding a way for it to be convincing for him to have this match. And I think what happens here is the fact that the idea is that if Sammo's character wasn't ill, he probably can win. And then later they do try to limit the techniques that Yip Man can use. Otherwise, to me, it's not believable that a Western boxer could win in this kind of encounter if you had a really good kung fu guy. I mean, more like what we're seeing here, where there's a huge range of technique, elbow strikes, blocks, low kicks, throws, all available to the kung fu player. So the boxer should be significantly outgunned. Though I know a lot of boxers are probably loath to admit that. But then, how often do you see this in modern times? I guess the modern equivalent is MMA, which now focuses, it seems to me, largely on groundwork rather than the stand-up game. Most of the MMA guys I've seen really aren't terrific boxers. So this is fantastically well shot. They get the camera in the ring, as you'd expect from Sammo. I mean, he's somebody now with these vast amount of experience. It's incredible to think, here's the guy who fought Bruce Lee at the beginning of Enter the Dragon, and he's still a relevant contemporary action filmmaker here in 2010. And I think most of the people who were working in 1973 kind of have come and gone. People who are working in Hollywood who were doing movies in that year, and Sammo's very much, you can almost say, in as good at his game as ever. So again, the Rocky III, this is actually Sammo as Apollo Creed, and Yip Man as Rocky Balboa, and I guess Twister would be Ivan Drago, as played by Dolph Lundgren. I didn't get that. I watched the movie. I'm the worst one for spotting this stuff. I saw the film. I just saw it for what it was. Then later, the Chinese newspapers had like this little thing where they had all the photos on one side of Yip Man 2 and photographs of Rocky 4 and showed the similarity. So, as I say, I mean, the idea is that much as was the case with Lam Ching-ying's character in A Prodigal Son, where he would win the fight with Frankie Chan, except he's afflicted by asthma. Here you've got the idea that, Sammo's character, were he not, out of breath because of his ailment. That's the Karate Kid move. Last time I saw him do that was in Gambling Ghost. And then after that, the Lohan hanging a corpse move, and then takes a good solid hit. Now, during one of these exchanges, Darren, much to his, horror, did actually cut and injure Sammo. Sammo's leg, I think, had gone from under him, and he moved in the wrong direction, and he had to get stitches in his cheek. He's very good about it. I mean, I should mention also another, I don't know whether this was intentional or not, but they put the black mouth guard on Twister that Dolph Lundgren had for the final bout in Rocky IV. So really, in terrific shape. I mean, look at the build. I mean, I told friends of mine, they wanted me for that movie, and they said, to play the boxer? And I'm like, 15, 20 years ago, I would have played the boxer. I was going to play the corrupt policeman. But Darren got in really good shape, and Lo Mong was telling me he's I think Darren's a one-woman kind of guy. Lo Mong was telling me that they'd shoot, finish for the evening, and Darren would go to the gym, and then he'd go back to the hotel room, talk to his girlfriend. I think it's his girlfriend, not his wife, but he'd talk to his other half on the phone. So it was like, good-hearted guy. This is like, you think, well, you just take his knees out, and that's going to be it. It's going to be all over. Always easy to fight these things from the commentary booth, as I'm sure everybody's saying. As Sammo says to Donnie, his character at one point, it's not that easy. But I think in a real fight, this is what you'd be looking to do, to use the kicking range. Bruce Lee defined the different ranges of combat. And if you can work at kicking range, it's going to be really hard. I actually did have an experience once. We were doing sparring in my younger days in Birmingham, and I was in with a boxer. And that time my boxing, was not that great, and so I was getting battered around the ring. And then for the next round, the trainer says, okay, just to show something, Bey, you can kick. And then there was no contest because the boxer couldn't even get in close because I'd be kicking in midsection and to the thigh. And, I'm not Bill Wallace, but, just the fact that the leg is significantly longer than the arms is going to mean that you're going to have an advantage in that range of combat. And Bruce Lee, at the beginning, in the fight him and Sammo have at the beginning of Enter the Dragon, he shows in microcosm the different ranges of combat. This match, comes down to being fought at boxing range, which really gives an advantage to Twister, to the Western boxer. So this is like, and there's a moment that you may or may not catch, which is that Sammo's character comes up. Now, here is like, again, this moment, great moment between two warriors that, whatever happens, Sammo really is choosing now. He'd rather die on his feet than to give in. And Yip Man kind of respecting that. It's a great moment. And Dennis Toe as well. Good close-up for him. So going into this, what's going to be the final bout, I don't know if you notice here, there's a moment when Sammo comes in and he applies a tiger claw, which if he'd had the breath and the strength to keep the move, that would actually be a finisher for the fight. Instead, now it's kind of game over and it becomes this raging bull thing. I mean, again, the referee would have stepped in by now. But it's, I guess, for the drama of the film, you get this sequence. And I really feel for Darren, because on one thing, in the character, yes, you mercilessly are pounding on your Chinese opponent and trying to make him fall to the canvas. But if you're Darren Shalavi, you're like, oh my God, I'm hitting Sammo Hung, who's my idol, and you're obviously trying not to hurt him. In fact, he did accidentally cut him at one point. But it's a pretty tough scene to play. So this is, as I say, very much like Jake LaMotta on the ropes in Raging Bull. Obviously, that was something that they were inspired by. I've got to give credit to Wilson Yip. Never gets in the way of letting the people like Sammo do what he wants, and Donnie knew what they want to do within the framework that he's created. And I think that's his great strength as a director, that he kind of keeps an eye on the overall drama and the flow of the piece and lets these guys do their stuff. And, Sammo has not been better in recent vintage, and Donnie has never been better. So whatever Wilson's doing is absolutely the right approach to directing, and I think, he still hasn't done his great work, Wilson, yet. There's still other work that he can do. So this is the passing of a champion, and, if I'm rewriting the movie to make it work better for me, I would say after Sammo dies, show Twister, show the English boxer having something of a change of heart, and then fighting Yip Man, but with some kind of respect, and give him an arc. So it's not entirely this one-note character, this killing machine, that he actually has something of an arc too. But they didn't just want that, but they wanted this very broad, almost comedically broad pantomime portrayal, and I'm sure Darren's giving them what they want. And I think he's a terrific... his plan, obviously, is to be a leading man, but I think he's really best served maybe in these character roles. We'll see. Now, I just want to mention that any actor, when your character dies in a Hong Kong film, you're given a licee, lucky money, because it's bad luck. So Sammo would have got a licee for allowing his character to be killed in the movie. Traditional Chinese funeral, white is the Chinese color of death, and you see a very distinctive outfit worn in mourning by the family. You might recognize that. There's a character in Donnie Yen's film Iron Monkey who wears that, the Scarface woman, when she has a fight with not with Donnie, but with Iron Monkey, played by Yu Wengong. She's wearing that same funeral garb. And also in the earlier film Prodigal Son, by Gajai, Yuen Bu wears something very similar when he fights Frankie Chan at the end of that film, because Frankie Chan's henchmen have murdered his Sifu. So this is a very traditional Chinese funeral, and sadly I remember going to a similar one for Wong Shenlong, the character played by Wong Xiaoming in this movie. And I love the line when Yip Man says, this is the master that I most respected. And they had Fan Su Wong back for one day, for one shot. And he really wasn't used. They tried to find ways to bring back characters from the first film, and it's a shame they didn't find a way to more properly integrate him into the plot. And you can't have a boxing movie without spinning newspapers coming into the screen. If you actually go back to any black and white boxing movie from Hollywood, you would have these the spinning newspaper telling you what's been going on. And notice these guys, this is true to the police uniform worn by the British officers of this era. They're wearing the shorts, these kind of green uniforms with the green shorts. I mean, how anybody could take them seriously when they were chasing after crooks, I don't know. And again, I think to the film's detriment that they didn't go the extra mile and find, more experienced actors to play some of the... If you're going to have Westerners in the movie, then it's great if you can find proper actors, but I know it's a budget consideration, and often they don't have the resources to find people that might do a better job than... There are always a lot of Westerners in Shanghai, in Hong Kong, who want to be in films, and I've done a few myself, and, I always kid and say I'm not really an actor, I was more of a talking prop, but if you want to do it well, then, just like if you're in Hollywood and you're doing a film with Chinese, you should get a real good Chinese actor, and the same thing here. Now, Edmund Wong did do a lot of great research for this time period, and they were actually Sikh officers working for the police at this time, because this was another part of the empire that you had Sikhs, and therefore they were brought in and they were used as police officers. So it was very appropriate that you would have them supporting a British, even a corrupt British officer like this one during this time. Now, you see, this is what I found is great about the first movie, and you're seeing it here with Kent Cheng's character, the fact that the beginning of a turning, he's not going to be what you thought. If you look at Lam Ga-dong in the first film, he starts off, he's the police captain, and then he's the turncoat, then he redeems himself. And in fact, they kept him alive. In the original cut of Yip Man, Lam Ga-dong is killed at the end of Yip Man, and they kept him alive with the idea he'd be in Yip Man 2. He's the only character they couldn't get. I think there was a scheduling clash. He was doing another film, so he couldn't come to work. But otherwise, they wanted to have his character also be relocated to Hong Kong, but it didn't happen. But yeah, so that's why I like that. When the characters who they brought over didn't really get much of a twist or a turn, and they're doing this with Kent Cheng, and I think that's the great thing, one of the things they have done very well in the Yip Man series. Now, here's a very stiff press conference, in terms of these guys sitting and delivering lines. As the British flag flies and you have the royalty photographs, it's a sad day for the empire. As you've got the pictures of the champion, Jimmy Olsen there taking his shots. Yeah, it's not a proud day to be British when you see this all going on here. And I think the way that it's being laid out, it's kind of thunk, thunk, thunk over the head. And there's a long tradition, unfortunately, in Hong Kong cinema when they've been playing to the crowd, because the reality is Hong Kong was a colony for so many years, and people did have mixed feelings about the British colonial presence. And there's good and bad to be said for it. And this is how he was told to do it, I imagine, is saying his lines one by one. And that's how you've been directed by Wilson. And as I say, it's tough because, you don't want to be at odds with your director. But stronger actors would come in and say, no, I really want to do it a little differently. And then you might be, the editing would be down to the director as well. So it's hard. You don't have much control if you're an actor. But I think the British actors in this came out pretty poorly. First, as I mentioned, when I first met Donnie and Darren first met was in a seminar in the UK at a place called the Academy, run by a guy called Bob Breen. And that was a really fantastic opportunity to kind of share the Hong Kong style of action with the Western world. And I think it was it was the first, and I don't know that it's been done really since. I tried after that to bring other people in, and never worked as well as the one with Donnie. And I think the fact that the Donnie Yen one is still on YouTube speaks for how well it was received at the time and subsequently. This interior also is set at the Shanghai Film Studios, and it just shows you, there's now, I think, at least 7 or 8 world-class studios in China. Hangdian, which is where they do a lot of big productions, where they shot Hero, Beijing Film Studios, where they did Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and now 2 at least in Shanghai, where you can shoot films. There's, I think it's Movie Maker, and then there's the Shanghai Film Studios, and anybody, with a major production can come to China, and I think it's on a par with anything you'd find anywhere in the world. Now, if you ask me what was the element that really made Yip Man leap out from the other Kung Fu pictures, action films being made at the same time, obviously the thing that is obvious is the fact that the martial arts scenes were extraordinary. and it was a great performance from Donnie Yen. But at the same time, there's been many other movies with great kung fu fighting and great set pieces that haven't done nearly as well. And I think the reason the film worked is because they had depicted for the first time a family man, a perfect husband and father, who's also a martial arts master. And I think a lot of women and a lot of older people were attracted to the character and attracted to the films. And that explained why you could get out to a much broader audience than the young male audience who normally support action movies. And by the way, this is me being pedantic, but if you look between these shots, the background people walking here, and then when we swap, they're completely different people walking in the background. Landlady played by Ma Zhengjin, a Shanghai-based character actress. So, I whenever I watch a movie like a bunch of times, I notice these little things. But I think it was William Friedkin who said matching is for wimps. Actually, he didn't use the word wimps, but I don't want to use inappropriate language. But somebody said, well, this shot won't match. He goes, matching, it's for wimps. So now Yip Man preparing with the wooden dummy. And now I mentioned earlier in passing, this is the adapted version of the dummy. When they actually had wooden dummies in Fatsan, because everybody owned their own properties, you just set it into the ground. And that was referred to as a dead dummy because the mukjong was dead in that it didn't really move. You just hit it. You had to be careful how you hit it. And you can actually see that kind of dummy depicted in the first Yip Man and also in there's a whole bunch of them in the martial arts school in Yip Man, The Legend Begins. Now here you see after he moved to Hong Kong, Yip Man was like, well, I don't have any land. I've just got my apartment, and his students the same. So they found a way to actually mount the dummy on this wooden frame. And they found it gives a lot of give, as you can see in these shots, the way it moves. So this was like a live dummy. So this remains the principal training aid. In the last film, when you saw him preparing to fight with Miura, he was training on the dummy, and now he's preparing to fight Twister. It's the same. The dummy is the central training. You're working on the dummy, and you're imagining different ways that you can attack an opponent. And this is, the core of his Wing Chun practice in preparing for these fights. So Ken Cheng, the character's about to show his true colors, which I really like the fact that you can have a character in these films that really reveals himself to be opposite to anticipated. Ken Cheng himself, he's most famous for playing a character called Fei Mao, a retarded man, and he played him originally in a film called Beloved Son of God, and then there was sequels to that and a TV series, and he would move his shoulders in a very distinctive way, but he was a very good-natured, mentally challenged person. I'm not sure what the politically correct term is for that, but that's the character he played. This, as you'll see from the deleted scenes, is a much longer part of a much longer sequence where you see an exchange between Donnie Yen and Donnie Yen's character, Yip Man, and Simon Yam's character. But they just cut it down to him. Yip Man has brought him some duck. So here, this again, very much like, I think it was Rocky 2, was when Adrian's going to have the baby, and I think she has the baby, and she says to him, go out and win. And here, this is kind of, similar situation where you have the wife who's about to give birth, but here she's like, don't bother him, he's got, other things to take care of. Now, you show me the woman going into labor who thinks that the husband, the father, has anything else he should be taking care of. But anyway, he plays a fantastic husband, and she's an amazing wife. Look at the great Art Deco production design, an amazing set. Great detail here, the period radios and what have you. But that set for the boxing is really an extraordinary accomplishment. It really is. I don't know that the exteriors, the rooftops of Hong Kong really fit the bill, but the kind of idea of having the town hall as this deco grand building, really, really works. And terrific location, and I think that they've asked for performances to match the location. I'm not talking about Donnie, but the MC and the other guys that come in. That this guy, I don't know if he could be, if they pumped him full of air, he could not be any broader in his performance. And at any given time, the TVB studio, and I guess ATV studios, which are the two primary television stations in Hong Kong, they'll have a resident Western actor who speaks perfect Cantonese to play those kind of roles. And this gentleman actually has been better on some of the TV shows. I think they really did push him, and they said we want it to be like a wrestling announcer, a bit over the top. Here's Darren again. Originally, he hails from Stockport in Greater Manchester, and after he and I parted company, he relocated to Canada. I know he was married to a Canadian lady. I remember we met in passing at the American Film Market one year in the Lowe's in Santa Monica. And then he had done American movies like Hostile Environment, Sometimes a Hero, Legion of the Dead, Beyond the Limits, and then Final Cut, he's in that. And he worked with the legendary Yui Ball. He's in Blood Rain, and done some, and also in The Name of the King, Dungeon Siege Tale. But I don't remember him having really standout roles in the Yui Ball movies. He didn't really get to show what he could do. But he'd done some stunt work as well on major films. I mean, his biggest international role would have been as the boxer opposite, I think he's a Russian in that, opposite Eddie Murphy's character in I Spy. And he's also done stunt work on Chronicles of Riddick, Night at the Museum, and 300, which I'm thinking 2 of the 3 of those was shot in Canada. So I would think it's his Canadian residency that has given him opportunities to be working in so many big productions. Canada, I know, is a great production center now. And Darren also worked in various TV series in Canada, including a show called Intelligence, and he was on the primetime show Reaper. And I think he now has a lead, or something close to a lead, in this Aladdin reboot, which is called The Last Jinn, which hasn't come out yet. Jinn, Jinn, not Gin. So we'll see how that works out for him. But here, physically, an extraordinary nemesis, but in terms of like the character and the performance, not really given a chance to show the full range of what he can do. 1 round. Now, shouldn't that be round 1? Maybe it's a prediction that he'll knock him out in 1 round. These moves here in this first bout, in the first round of the fight, remind me a little bit of the bout between Jet Li's Fot Yun Gap and a wrestler in Fearless. And I think when you actually do have Kung Fu versus Western boxing, Western wrestling, you do end up, in similar kind of figuring out how that would work in cinematic terms, and there's definitely going to be common ground between how you have Westerners fighting against Western boxers, Western wrestlers fighting against Kung Fu men. Let's say, he's got, they don't have any gloves on Yip Man, and he's allowed to kick. It's kind of, as I say, it's ironic that Darren, who's such a fantastic kicker, is the guy who's not kicking, and then later is, complicit in not allowing the other guy to kick either. But I still think that if you've got all those weapons at your disposal, and you say anything goes, elbows, knees, finger strikes, headbutt, whatever, grappling, kicking, whatever you want to do, you can do it. Then it should really be a no contest if you're taking on a boxer. But they obviously need to build up this guy. And my God, Darren's certainly a terrific physical specimen. I mean, he's a guy where you look at him and you think, well, maybe this guy, in certain circumstances, he could kill Sammo Hung, and he could beat Donnie Yen. And so, I mean, credit to him for maintaining that physique. I don't know that you can always get on Hong Kong movie sets the kind of protein, the kind of nutrition that you need to maintain a physique like that. So he obviously planned ahead, and it worked for him because he's in terrific shape in the film. So Donnie, by the way, you always mention that Donnie is my age, or close to, and still in fantastic shape. Again, much like myself. So it just shows the longevity of the benefits of Kung Fu training, as opposed to, let's see how all these MMA guys are when they're almost 50, how well they'll do. And this is what I'm talking about. This is Yip Man coming back strong. And I mean, this should be the ending of the fight, but it would be anticlimactic. So they're finding ways to extend it and to make it more of an even match. But in reality, this would be it for him, I think. If you got him down like this and you can choke him out, or you could do any other kind of techniques, I don't think the boxer would still be in the game. But, as I say, there's always like real martial art, and there's the application of martial art through cinema, which is what we're seeing here. All these, there's some great boxing movies from the 1930s, and they all have some, cliche elements. The spinning newspaper telling you who's won the last fight, and that kind of stuff. Here, look at this, not the long count, but the long round. That's very much 1930s boxing. The kind of the timekeepers in cahoots with the Western boxer. That's definitely something you'd see in one of those old movies. So just as it might be that the kung fu guy kind of attacks again, then the guy calls time. This fantastic location constructed specifically for the film, and actually looking at it, I don't know there was anywhere quite like this in Hong Kong of that period. What I like about it is the fact that you are seeing that you are seeing the Art Deco look of the era of the 30s and 40s. So it's really fitting. And full power to the production design team for coming up with this fantastic location for this showdown. Bam! And this is similar to when he fought Miura in the first movie. It's Yip Man using his opponent like a dummy and working him from side to side. And it's like you have to, and that's of course the kick that I think causes them to start deciding to ban kicks in this bout. Where that came from, I don't know, because when he was killing Sammo Hung, Sammo was allowed to kick. So again, all this kind of like groundwork, all the weapons that you have at your disposal as a martial artist, absolutely should make it unrealistic that a boxer, just with two hands, boof, punching after the bell, every dirty trick that comes along. That was almost a $1 million baby moment. Good thing the stool was not in the ring. Whenever you do, there's such a great, I talk about, all the years of kung fu filmmaking. There's also, in the West, a great tradition of boxing films, and every time you do a boxing movie now, you at one level and one way you're trying to kind of do something new and different and get away from what's been done before. At the same time, everybody's aware of Rocky, they're aware of Raging Bull, so you are going to get scenes, or Somebody Up There Likes Me, or all these other great boxing films. You are going to see scenes that stayed in your influence. They're all part of our memory now of watching. There's been in terms of sports movies, there's an unusual number of great sports films about boxing for some reason in America. So there's a lot of these boxing films that have a very profound place in people's memories, collective memories. So now going into 3-round, and this is when they're really, putting in the fix. It's like, you're not allowed to kick. You can forfeit the match now, but you're not allowed to kick. So this is like, so you're saying Kung Fu is weak in the Western boxing, but only if the Kung Fu fighter doesn't kick, and kicking is a part of Kung Fu, or grapple, or this or that. I guess he's still allowed to grapple and use his other hand techniques. But to me, the kicking is the main thing, because if you can win it at kicking range, then, there's no way somebody who's stuck in boxing range could have a look in. By the way, Darren did a lot of, normally when they use Westerners for these films, they are brought in, like I jokingly described myself, as a talking prop. But here they actually interview Darren on the behind-the-scenes material, and they invited him to the premiere, and he did some press in the south of China for the movie, which is really unprecedented. Normally, unless it's an American name actor, they wouldn't do that. But in Darren's case, everybody was so happy with his work that he actually was treated exactly the same as he would if he was a Chinese actor. Sounds like you'd expect that, but actually if you've ever worked as a Westerner in Hong Kong films, you'd know that's not always the case. By the way, in strict boxing terms, I guess the second knockdown was after the bell, but this would be a TKO. I'm not quite sure what the boxing rules were in the late 30s, in the mid-40s. But now, if you'd actually been knocked down 3 times, it would be a TKO and the fight would be over. But I guess the second knockdown, they're treating as being after the bell, so they would just have taken points off Twister. So now when we get into this finale, you really can see why in mainland China the film was such a huge success, why the Chinese people loved it, because it really is slightly jingoistic, but it's like a testament to Chinese pride that in the end, Chinese Kung Fu is going to triumph over Western aggression. And you notice in this finale here, not only is Yip Man using Wing Chun, but it also uses some Hung Kun or Hung Gar technique, which is, I guess, inspired by and on behalf of Sammo Hung. So he's hitting the guy with the full range of Chinese Kung Fu, apart from the kicks. He's using all the hand techniques that Southern Chinese Kung Fu has to offer. And so audiences were on their feet when this played in theaters, and all the techniques that Sammo was trying to use earlier, he's now applying them successfully. So it's a fantastic finale, and absolutely you can see why Chinese audiences went for it. And, international audiences appreciate it too. But what's important is what's the difference between Yip Man and the other people we see, the other fighters in the movie, is that, with Miura as well, there's a certain point where he won't cross, that he's not brutal, that he's not a sadist. He just uses the art for what he feels is right. And there's a moment when Simon Yam's character is talking about the heroes of Fat San, Fong Sayuk, Wong Fei-hung, and Yip Man. And I definitely feel after these films, in terms of our pop culture, Yip Man is absolutely at the same level as Fong Sayuk and Wong Fei-hung. And I'm really happy and proud for Donnie, because both Fong Sayuk and Wong Fei-hung are played most memorably recently by Jet Li. But Yip Man is absolutely Donnie Yen's character. And I'd be interested to see what Wong Kar-wai does with his Grandmaster movie, where Tony Leung Chiu-wai is playing Yip Man. But I definitely think if you ask people who is Yip Man, they're going to think of Donnie Yen, and quite rightly. He really made the part his own. This film, I've said before, it's kind of a role that was waiting for him. It was waiting for him to grow sufficiently as an actor and as a person that he could really embody all the aspects of Yip Man, and he does it. And I hope they do number 3. I'm not sure what the story would be. I know it's going to be about it would be about Yip Man and Bruce Lee, but what the actual narrative would be, I've no idea. I'm sure they're thinking about it. Now look at this. This police officer finally is arrested. Comes in and I shall now read the script. But anyway, the important thing is he's arrested. It could have been me, not that guy. This guy could have been me. And looking at the movie, it's such a great film. I kind of regret it, but I have to make a living, and I was, it was just the money for the amount of time you'd have to be away from Hong Kong. It just didn't work for me, unless it was my own movie, which it wasn't. So now here's his version. Look at that beautiful setting, beautiful work there on the production design. This is Donnie's version, Yip Man's version of the Rocky IV post-fight speech. If you remember in Rocky IV, after Rocky has beaten Ivan Drago, he gets in the middle of the ring and he addresses all the Russians, and we're going to all change, we're going to all change. And this, I think, is a much more intelligent version of that speech. Yip Man, of course, very private and quiet person for a kung fu icon. But here he's actually stepping up as a representative of the Chinese kung fu fraternity and making a statement to the assembled audience. So it's good. I think it's a nice resolution. I would have liked a moment between him and Twister. The Twister would have recognized the better man and learned something. He would have had more of an arc. But they kind of just have him listening in the corner, obviously badly beaten and much chastened at this point. But they didn't really do much with him. There he is, and that's the last we see of him in the film. So this is there was a recurring theme when he says to Sammo Hung's character earlier, the important thing is what means more, winning in combat or that you can come home to your family. And now he wants to go home to his family. So all the Western people you see in the audience, Shanghai-based, you always have like a rotating cast of Westerners who are available to be in films, working in companies there, teaching English, travelers, and you have like wranglers who go out and find the requisite number of people. We do the same thing in Hong Kong. Used to be the legendary, infamous Chungking Mansions. You'd go there and say, who wants to be in a movie? And people would stagger out from their hostels. Last shot of the, South China City posing as Hong Kong. And the happiest of endings for anybody there. He comes in having won this battle against this fearsome foe and arrives home to find that his wife has given birth to another lovely baby boy, Yip Ching. And I've met Yip Ching a number of times as well. I don't know if I trained with him. I trained with Yip Chun definitely. But Yip Ching, I remember meeting when they jointly did a tour in England where they were teaching Kung Fu. It's interesting that, the idea here is the Chinese overcoming the Westerners, but it's ironic that the next generation of great Kung Fu practitioners undoubtedly will come from the West. Whether it's, people like David Peterson, who've learned from Wong Shen Leung, or someone like Philip in the Choi Lei Fut and Wing Chun, who is like Chinese but raised in Chicago. That's definitely the next generation. It's not, I don't think, going to be Hong Kong Chinese people, young Hong Kong Chinese people carrying the flag for Kung Fu in the 21st century. So that's the way of the world. Now, this is interesting. This last scene is kind of the first scene, one of the early scenes I read when I got the script for Yip Man, way back when, before they'd even made the movie, is Calvin Cheng coming in, and he's going to introduce an actor, Kang Do-yin, Jing Dayan, who plays Bruce Lee, Lei Xiulong, and he looks just like Bruce Lee did as a child actor. And it's not really referenced here. I think Yip Man might have recognized him as a child actor because he was well known at that time. And in reality, the connection was that Yip Man was a friend of Lei Hoi-chun and was much older, I think, when he finally met Bruce Lee seriously to say, you be my student. But he knew him through Lei Hoi-chun. So here he's being introduced by Calvin Cheng's character. But in real life, the connection was through the friendship between Yip Man and Lei Hoi-chun. Later, Bruce Lee did come and train seriously with Yip Man, and though in terms of learning the Wing Chun system, maybe wasn't the preeminent student, in terms of an illustrious follower of Yip Man, absolutely, Bruce Lee put Hong Kong on the map, Kung Fu on the map, Wing Chun on the map, Chinese martial arts, to this day remains a phenomenon. They just finished making a film in Guangzhou, which is about the life of the young Bruce Lee, based on the memories of Robert Lee, Bruce's younger brother. And I know that film's sold around the world. I don't know if they have Yip Man in the first one. I imagine they must do. I haven't seen the film, but we've acquired it for UK for Cine Asia, and it's also been sold elsewhere. So Bruce Lee's still the great brand in Kung Fu cinema, and I think this movie and its predecessor, both of them do great service to the name of Yip Man. People didn't know the name Yip Man before, they do now, that's for sure. And also to the memory of Bruce Lee, who obviously owed a great debt, which he acknowledged, to the teachings of the great Yip Man. So the title song that's going to be cranked out here. It's No Eye of the Tiger, but they do their best. It's called Unbeatable. It's written by veteran Hong Kong composer Chris Babida with lyrics by Serena Tong, and it's sung by Calvin Cheng. I mentioned that earlier, who's the young actor who plays Simon Yam's son in the movie, Calvin Cheng. Calvin is the name of my second oldest son, and this Calvin Cheng singing very bluesy voice, just like my Calvin, my twins, those two middle boys, the twins, they love to belt out tunes as well. They want to form a rock band. So maybe they're going to be the Jonas Brothers of the new era. God help us. So anyway, it's been a great pleasure to look at this film again. I mean, any opportunity to watch Yip Man 1 and Yip Man 2, I enjoy it because they're my favorite Kung Fu movies of recent vintage. And also, I feel, they're almost like family movies for me because I've had the pleasure of knowing Donnie Yen for so many years, knowing Sammo for many years as well. I first met Sammo, I think I was 19 years old. I first met Sammo Hung. And then in this movie, of course, my prodigal son, Darren Shalavi. So when I look at these films, I'm like, and I know people behind the camera, Wilson Yip, I know very well. I knew him before he worked with Donnie. And Raymond Wong Bat Ming, an old friend and colleague. So I look at these films and I enjoy them as movies, and I also feel that they bring together a lot of aspects of Hong Kong culture, film culture, and martial arts that I've really come to appreciate. So I think I'm really gratified to see that they found a worldwide audience. Thank you so much for your continued support of the Cine Asia label and for our efforts here. It's much appreciated. This is Bey Logan saying goodbye, Joigin, Jiajian, sayonara, and good luck with where you go and with what you do. Thank you.